to get out to the Rude Guest Hotline, bring in our buddy from Monumental, Chase Hughes. Chase, what's going
what's
on,
up,
man?
brother?
Hey, what's going on, guys? BMitch, you would appreciate this. Today I'm going to kick off crab season, so I'm looking forward to that.
Uh-oh.
There you go.
Are you cooking them or you go and buy them?
I'm not cooking them. You probably know this better than anyone. It just makes your house smell like crabs. So
That's why you do it outside.
Yeah, there you go.
If you do it outside, your house will smell like crab, dude.
So, Chase, you've been in Chicago, right, for all of the stuff going down with the NBA Draft Lottery, NBA Combine. What were some of your takeaways? Obviously, the Wiz get the number one pick, but seeing the guys work out and everything at the Combine, what'd you make of it?
Yeah, I think a very impressive combine. I mean, you never want to make too much of like the athletic measurements and how high people jump. The more you look back at the history of the combine, you can sort of see that some of that stuff doesn't matter as much as you might think at face value. But I think it confirmed that this draft class has a special group of athletes at the top. I think all four of the top prospects, A.J. Dybantsa, Darryn Peterson, Cam Boozer, and Caleb Wilson, did something that would catch your eye and be like, whoa, that's unusual for someone their size. Debansa in particular, I mean, it is unbelievable. I'm just running the numbers right now. I'm going to write a story. 6'8.5" without shoes, 42-inch vertical leap. So he's basically the same height as Dwight Howard, but jumps higher than Derrick Rose. And the most ridiculous thing I found so far is he had the same three-quarter court sprint as John Wall. So I think we're talking about one of the best athletes to ever come into the NBA. And if you're looking at this century, maybe right after LeBron and Victor Wembanyama.
What was it about Caleb Wilson that made you go, wow, that guy could do that?
Well, he measured in a little bit taller than I thought. He's about 6'9" without shoes, which means he's going to be 6'10" plus on the court. And it's tough to tell. I watched a lot of his games this year. I watched him go up against Cameron Boozer, of course, Duke UNC. And the angle of the television camera, you can't tell who's taller, but he's a little bit taller than Cam Boozer. So I think that's worth noting. Pretty fast and also close to a 40-inch vertical leap. Also not normal for a guy that size. Like you just don't see athletes like this come around very often. And it's crazy because he's been overshadowed a little bit by Dybantsa, who's even more special in that regard.
Peterson came out and talked about the creatine. What was that conversation? I'm sure you're there. People were discussing that. What was the conversation like?
Yeah, so I was there for Peterson's entire press conference, and he was asked about that. And the most interesting thing he said is that teams aren't asking him about it. He said he was kind of surprised by that, but he had done an interview with ESPN recently where he kind of cleared up some of those questions, blamed it on creatine. He said during the press conference that, when he got to Kansas, they wanted him to bulk up, and they were giving him creatine and smoothies, and that led to cramps, and it was basically cramps around his entire body. And so he mentioned that a little bit, explained it further, and then said, yeah, surprisingly, teams aren't even really asking me about that.
Talking with Chase Hughes from Monumental here on BMitch and Finlay. I think that you'll appreciate this, BMitch. So they had the interviews the last couple of days, and generally it's a casual setting. I saw Chase write about this in his story. Guys usually showing up in shorts and a T-shirt or their workout equipment, whatever. A.J. Dybantsa showed up in a suit and tie, ready to roll, like a number one overall pick. What'd you make of A.J.? He seems like such an impressive individual.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool. I haven't seen that before. I've been in this setting probably 4 or 5 times. It's usually very casual. And he said that he treated the whole day like a job interview. He'd met with some teams that morning, and his father was like, well, it's a job interview. Why don't you dress up like it's a job interview? So he put on a suit and tie. He said that he's never had a job before because he's been taking basketball very serious since he was 13 years old. The closest thing he ever had to a job, and this relates to him and his dad, when he played in the McDonald's All-American game last year, his dad implored him to work a shift at McDonald's. So he worked a drive-through at a McDonald's and was handed out fries and shakes. And so he's
not going to have to do that.
Take this. No, he's not going to have to do that. I don't think he's ever going to have a real job again. Yeah, exactly. But so he wanted to kind of embrace the entire process and do what anyone else would do if they had a job interview.
But tell him this is what happened in the job interview for the NBA. make the shots, flush the ball, and block other people's shot. That suit don't make one bit of difference. Now, when you get off of it, be sharp. True. Be sharp. Yeah, be sharp.
Right.
What's your feel? You know, we've had discussion. We were talking about this yesterday a little bit of would the Wizards consider trading back to 2 with the Jazz, understanding how much Utah, at least the link there of wanting A.J. Dybantsa. What's your feel on that? Do you think that's something that the Wizards are going to truly consider, or do you think they end up sticking and picking at 1? How do you feel about that situation there?
I definitely think they're going to consider it. I mean, Michael Winger, I think, has indicated that on the record. You have to consider it, right? It's part of due diligence. You got to know what your options are. And so I think they'll weigh their options. But I don't think they have really zeroed in on either of these players yet. And so I think they got to figure that out first. And they've got some time. And I think once they determine which guy they want, if it's someone they feel like they can get it to, I think that becomes a more viable option. But, you know, just looking at the face of it, it doesn't happen often where the number 1 pick is traded. I think there's a lot of reasons for that. You know, it's a very rare opportunity to select first and to just have your pick of all the players. I mean, think about it, how unique that is within an executive's career. You don't get to do that in free agency or trades, really. This is your one opportunity, and it happens to be a great draft class. So, you know, Michael Winger and Will Dawkins probably see this through their experiences, maybe a once-in-a-career opportunity, right? And then it's also risky. I mean, it doesn't happen often, and when it does, sometimes it backfires. You know, the last time the first pick was traded, it was Markelle Fultz, the Celtics, who were run by Danny Ainge at the time. Of course, he's in Utah. They moved back, got Jason Tatum. Didn't work out for the Sixers very well. So sometimes you don't want to overthink it. You got the number 1 pick at a great draft class. You know, take the guy you want. But if they feel like they can get that guy at 2 or maybe 3 or 4, I definitely think they'll consider it.
But I think if the guy the other people want is the one that, you know, some people say there is not a clear-cut number 1. Some people lean towards Debansa. Some people leave towards Peterson. But if the team behind you wants what's called, I'm going to manipulate that, get something out of it.
Yeah, I mean, how much or how bad do they want
That's
him,
what I'm saying.
Whatever player it is. Right, exactly.
If they really love him, they could probably have him, and I'm going to get something for it.
Right. You just got to be very sure of your evaluation if you're moving back that the guy you're getting could be better, or at least the package could, at a minimum, work in your favor, depending on what you also get. Because obviously, if you're moving back from 1, you know, you're going to have to pay a price to do that.
Totally.
Chase, for you as an evaluator, not asking like what Winger and them are going to do, but just for you specifically, when you look at the top 2 guys, which would be Debansa and Peterson, and the downsides of the 2 guys, for Peterson, it's this creatine, cramping, injury thing, and, you know, some people are wondering whether, you know, he's checking himself out of games. That stuff doesn't bother me as much when he comes to the NBA, so it's more so an injury-related thing. And on the floor, I mean, there's not many weaknesses in his game versus A.J. Debansa. You don't have to worry about the injury stuff or off-court things. It's more so, what is his three-point shot going to look like in defense? When you're evaluating and you're trying to make a decision, if you were making the number 1 overall pick, how much do those weigh in versus both these guys have superstar ceilings?
I mean, all of it factors in. I mean, I think with both of those guys, you know, with their weaknesses, it comes down to how much you can coach that up. You know, obviously Debansa, I don't think his shot is a big concern. I mean, he shot not a great percentage from 3, but there were portions of the season where he shot really well from 3 on a good amount of attempts. So anytime there's a guy with a developing shot, you got to try to project, can we make this better? Both of them will have to improve defensively. I mean, Debansa was really honest about that, said he played kind of lazy off-ball defense, and he knows he's not going to be able to do that at the next level. Peterson, I think for him, it's not just the injuries. You got to determine what his position is long-term and how passing factors in. He was a very low assist guy, so kind of like Ace Bailey last year is like, okay, can we develop this guy into more than just a scorer? But it's interesting because he said he's played point guard his whole life. So I think their teams, and the Wizards definitely do this, will have to look at, you know, what he did in the AAU circuit and in high school to determine if they think he can be more of a playmaker long-term, which is what he wants to be. So they're definitely got to factor all that in. Shooting, I think the Wizards, you know, Will Dawkins at one time, I thought put it well about shooting, where he said you can turn a bad shooter into a good shooter and a good shooter into a great shooter, but you can't turn a bad shooter into a great shooter. So there's a starting point, right? Mm-hmm. But both of these guys, I think, have a pretty decent starting point, especially Peterson when it comes to that.
some people think point guard means get points guard. so,
Right.
I mean, I'm shooting it all the time. No. Point guard means you got to make everybody else get involved.
Well,
Yeah,
Yeah,
and and even in this day and age, the point guard position has changed over the years,
Yeah.
but some of those same principles certainly apply.
I'm a big proponent of size, and that's partially why I'm big on Debansa over Peterson. But if Peterson can play the point guard position, that'd be a pretty big guard, almost 6'6", for what he's going to give you. How much does that play into it? And some of the versatility. Peterson's going to be a combo guard versus AJ Debansa. If you can work on his defense, could potentially guard 1 through 4 and give you a little more versatility just because of his size.
Yeah, I mean, on the topic of size, I thought Darryn Peterson measuring at 6'4.5" without shoes was a good sign for him. Again, it's hard to tell when you're watching the games on TV. That's why scouts go out and watch these guys in person. And you talk to NBA scouts. What a lot of them will do is get there for warm-ups and stand on the baseline or stand on the sideline and just try to get a good sense of how tall a guy is because the colleges aren't necessarily going to be truthful in that. But
yeah, they lie.
6'4.5" without shoes. Yeah, same exact height as Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Devin Booker, two guys that Peterson himself compares himself to. Same exact height as Dylan Harper last year. So he's got positional size. Certainly at the 1, I think even at the 2, that's tall enough. So about 6'6" on the court. But yeah, I mean Debansa, he was taller than I expected he would be at 6'8.5" without shoes. Wilson a little bit taller. Boozer's the one guy who was slightly shorter than I thought, compared to what he's listed at. But he has a wingspan and a standing reach that stands out, and that's definitely important. Ultimately, it's how close are you to the rim, and Boozer's pretty close.
What was his height?
He was a little over 6'8" without shoes.
Okay.
But with a 9-foot standing reach, so he can, if he's just flat-footed on the ground, he reaches up and he can reach higher than Debansa can.
Talking with Chase Hughes here on the Rude Guest Hotline. BMitch and Finlay, Toby Altizer in for JP. I want to continue talking about Cameron Boozer. I don't know how much in play he is at number 1, but what did you make of watching him going through the combine? One of the knocks on him is lack of athleticism compared to some of the other guys, and then you see some of the agility drills, and he was able to be just as good, if not better, than some of the guys that are thought to be more athletic than him.
Yeah, no, that was definitely noteworthy. Looking at the lane agility, which, who knows how much it matters, but they do this drill for a reason, right? And he was same as Debansa, better than Wilson, and better than Peterson. So, he's much bigger than Darryn Peterson, but he was more agile, at least based on that one drill. So a great sign for him because lateral quickness is something you hear people question. Also, great shooter. He looked good in the shooting drills. I don't have it in front of me where he ended up ranking, but just a textbook jumper. Like the arc on his shot is just perfect every single time. So I think that really bodes well because he's 255 pounds and he's got great shooting touch at all 3 levels. And that's certainly going to play at the NBA level.
He's been doing it all his life. His dad was like, look, I guarantee you he's been working outside since he was 2.
Well, and that's one of the things that stands out to me, Chase, is like people knock him and say, all right, he's not going to play bully ball in the pros, and he's not going to be able to do it as much as he did in college, but someone that size can still move people in the league.
Yeah, and the shooting touch is really important because he's not just going to lower his shoulder and push you back a few feet. Yeah. He's going to have great shooting touch once he gets in a window to shoot, So I think if he does become a star, I think a lot of stuff will make sense in hindsight, where you look at some of the players his size around the league that are stars, Alperen Şengün, for instance, in Houston, it's the physical play, but also just the touch around the basket. And his passing feel is so impressive. I went to see him play against Michigan at Capital One Arena, and I was sitting pretty high up so I could see all the angles. The way he manipulates the defense and fires accurate passes is very special, especially for his size. And his feel for the game and spacing and his basketball IQ, I feel like you only see that level of feel from a guy whose parent was a pro. Like you see it from like Luka, like Steph Curry. Dylan Harper has that. Like the types of guys who you knew were in basketball gyms when they were in diapers.
Was Acuff there?
Yeah, Darius Acuff was there and had the fastest 3-quarter sprint in the combine.
Incredible.
Faster than John Wall, faster than
Wow.
about the same as Derrick Rose. So he's extremely fast, and he looked really good in the shooting drills, which, of course, was not surprising.
Yeah.
Do you think, we were talking about the trade earlier, is there any chance that it would be anything more than they would move back further than 2? Like, it feels like to me, if they're going to trade, it's going to be with the Jazz to make sure that they keep themselves in the either Peterson or Dybantsa sweepstakes. They wouldn't move back further than 2 unless there's just a ridiculous offer that would be unforeseen, right?
Yeah, that'd be my guess. I can't rule it out, but it would be pretty surprising. I mean, you get the number 1 pick, and we'll see how this develops over the next few weeks. But it does seem like there's 2 prospects who've separated themselves between A.J. Debansa and Darryn Peterson. To go back to 3 or 4 would be surprising, but Michael Winger did say that right now they're evaluating 3 or 4 guys for this spot. So, maybe they fall in love with Cameron Boozer or Caleb Wilson and feel like that's the guy, and whatever they can get in addition, makes it worth moving back. But yeah. I would definitely consider that unlikely, especially if you look at the history of the draft. It's not common that teams do that.
What do you make of some of the people talking about the way that they've been talking about Caleb Wilson, with some of the discussion of him looking like a young Kevin Garnett? I think it was Lou Williams said, or I forget exactly who it was.
Sean Kemp
was saying that, you've heard Sean Kemp, someone was saying he's got a ceiling of like a Giannis. What are your thoughts on Caleb Wilson? Because I think if they were to move back further than 2, which I don't think is likely, but if so, I would love to see Caleb Wilson.
Yeah, I mean, I like Caleb Wilson a lot. It's interesting because the other guys have overshadowed him offensively, but he still scored 20 points a game last year at North Carolina on really good efficiency. Just didn't make his threes. And he's the best defender, I think, or at least has the highest ceiling as a defensive player of the top 4 guys. He averaged about 1.5 blocks and 1.5 steals per game last season, which is extremely rare. Like, I ran the numbers, like only 2 guys did that last year's freshman. It was Cooper Flagg and Thomas Sorber. So he's a great athlete, and he's got really active hands and a good motor. And so, like, as far as just a canvas to mold, I think on defense, he's got the most selling points of these guys. Kevin Garnett, probably a little bit taller, but, Caleb Wilson said that he sees that comparison. And, I think what stands out to me is the athleticism, and that was confirmed with the 40-inch vertical leap. And Sean Kemp, you mentioned that name. That's someone who I would compare him to just in terms of the power and the force when he can throw down dunks. So I don't know if he's going to be, going to the Wizards, of course. They have a chance to pick higher than he's projected to go. But if they did get him and you pair him with Trae Young, that would be pretty fun. I think it would be reminiscent of like Chris Paul and Blake Griffin in Lob City.
Last thing, not to put you on the spot, but if you're making the pick at number 1, who you taking?
I would lean Debansa. I think it's very close if you look at the mock drafts, but he's projected to go 1 and more of them than not. And he just checks off so many boxes. I've been so impressed with him all year. Just in terms of the size and the athleticism, which we now know is even better than we thought, the offensive skill set, what he can do off the dribble, how he can score at multiple levels, and then just the intangibles seem to be great. I mean, the competitive edge, you can see that just by watching a half of a game that he plays in. He's very, very intense on the court. Seems to love the game of basketball, take it very seriously. So if you're talking about a super athlete who also loves the game, that's what you look for. But I could also make the case for Peterson, and I think it's really, really close between those 2 guys.
Well, Chase, great coverage out in Chicago. Appreciate you joining us for a couple of minutes.
Absolutely, guys. Have a great weekend.